You need before we get started. Five to 10 minutes and we'll get going.
Shad and River Herring board members, please take your seats. Okay, Shad and River Herring board members, please take your seats. We're starting in 1 minute. Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to convene the Shad and River Herring Management Board. Call this meeting to order. First agenda item is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? Seeing none, consider the agenda approved. The proceedings from our February 2013 meeting, if any of you remember back that far, are there any changes or additions to the proceedings? Seeing none, consider the proceedings approved. Public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jeff Kalin from Lens Fisheries in Cape May, New Jersey. I'm also a Mid-Atlantic Council member, but I'm just speaking personally. The thing I wanted to raise, Mr. Chairman, was at the last discussion on eels, Jeffrey Pierce from the Alewife Harvesters of Maine put together a very interesting package of information around dams and obstructions and so forth that affect not only eels but river herring. And I thought it was a great package, really good work. And I'd like to commend that to this board. It's the same guys, so and I think what Jeff brought in was really interesting, and I think it's the kind of work that we're going to do in the TUG. I'm a TUG member now, and we've got this Mid-Atlantic thing rolling out. You know, the TUG. I think it's the OOD. If you ever guys watch Doctor Who with the OOD, you know, that's what I think of when I hear about the TUG. But so I think it's good information. And look forward to that larger process, and appreciate the opportunity to say that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are any other members of the public who like to speak? Seeing none, first order of business is the consideration of the FMP review and state compliance. Turn it over to Marin, or Marin, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yep. So this is the 2013 Shad and River Herring FMP review and compliance report. There have been no updates to the status of the stock since the last FMP review. So just to remind you, American shad in 2007, the stocks were found to be at all-time lows and do not appear to be recovering. Hickory shad, the status is unknown, and river herring, the 2012 benchmark stock assessment found that stock was depleted. Similarly to those statuses, the shad commercial landings have gone down significantly since the 1950s. In 2012, there were states that landed them were Maine, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. And river herring landings have also gone down significantly. The states that landed river herring in 2012 were Maine, New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, North Carolina, and South Carolina. There are some stocking programs. States that have those are Maine, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and South Carolina. And approximately 16 million shad were stocked in 2012, and 400,000 alewife were stocked in 2012. There were 297 sturgeon interactions reported, and those states were Connecticut, New Jersey, Virginia, South Carolina, and Georgia, and all of those sturgeon were released alive. The PRT recommends that states that didn't include any of the mandatory reporting requirements do so in the future. There are a couple states that's listed in the PRT report for you all to review, but that was just basically the PRT recommendation. And the PRT would like the board to task the TC with the following: review of recreational compliance and the ability of states to provide the recreational data, since a majority of the states rely on MRIP for catch estimates, and we're not sure if those states have survey data of their own. And also to review the methods to ensure that states submit data that were previously unavailable. And so those are the two recommendations that the PRT would like the board to task the TC with. And finally, just the de minimis. Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts have requested de minimis for shad, and New Hampshire and Massachusetts have requested de minimis for river herring. All of these states have been granted de minimis in the past, and the PRT recommends granting them de minimis status again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions, Doug?
Not just a question, but a comment to make the board aware of. Marin made a very brief thing that New Hampshire had commercial landings. And I want the board to be aware of that's a product of our ACC-based database. The harvest that we have of river herring is primarily for all people for personal use. But ACCSP, so it's recreational, but ACCSP does not have the capability of taking cast net or small gill net landings and putting it into the recreational component. So just be aware of that. It's called commercial, but that's because it comes out of the ACCSP. It's not sold. That's the bottom line. It's such a small amount, it doesn't make that much difference, but it's something that I've asked the coordinating council member and our ops committee member to try and address at the ACCSP level. They need to have a component in there that allows for recreational harvest by nets.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just comment, I didn't see I didn't see Delaware listed under states that have a shad stocking program, Marin, and we do stock shad. Thank you.
Michelle?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several comments. I guess first, Marin, I just double-checked the names on the page of the FMP review. Sarah Winslow, a legend in her own time from our agency, but she retired 3 years ago, so I'm pretty sure she was not part of the plan review. And then also I had a question in Table 1 of the FMP review. It lists the states that have approved Shad sustainable fishery plans, and Virginia isn't listed in there, and I'm pretty sure we approved a sustainable fishery plan for the state of Virginia at the annual meeting back in Philadelphia, so that was one thing I would note. And then in terms of the review of the compliance reports by the plan review team, I appreciate that is an incredibly time-consuming task, and really appreciate the efforts of the PRT to go through all the compliance reports and note any information that might be missing. And I assume that any missing information is communicated back to the technical committee members. Is that correct? Because I was just taking a look at what was noted as being lacking for North Carolina, and it's actually in the report. So there's, characterization of other losses for shad was lacking, and there's actually an appendix and some tables that include that information, as well as it says no incidents of repeat spawning as a piece of information that was missing, and there's multiple tables that include the repeat spawning information and our compliance report. And then I think I'm a little confused by the statement that no recreational or commercial gear data for shad were collected, because clearly we collect gear information on our trip tickets. So I guess maybe I just encourage the PRT to be a little bit more specific in what pieces of information are lacking, just to help the technical committee members ensure that that information is included. And it would probably be helpful, just because it appears that maybe some information was overlooked just during the review that's actually been included. So thank you.
The PRT is composed of new members, so I'll definitely pass that message on, and hopefully we'll do better in the future.
Bill Adler.
Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate for me to make a motion to accept the de minimis status that was recommended?
Could you just hang on 1 second, see if there are any more questions? Seeing none, you're on, Bill.
Okay, I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation of the PRT to accept Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts de minimis status for shad, and New Hampshire and Massachusetts for de minimis status of river herring. I believe that is what you...
Seconded by Pat Augustine. Is there board discussion on the motion that is almost on the board? Doug?
Just two things. One, do we also want to accept the FMP review? And then also, do we want to conclude some of the recommendations the PRT has for tasking the technical committee? They made two recommendations for tasking the technical committee.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. I was about to bring that up, and I was originally going to ask Tony if she had a motion crafted for Pat, but if you could help with the wordsmithing on Bill's motion, I think it would be beneficial to include all the measures.
I don't think my name is that way, Bill.
She's going to fix one thing at a time. So this is your motion, Bill?
That is correct.
It is seconded by Mr. Augustine. Is there any board discussion on the motion on the board? Dave?
I guess I just need a reminder of what the tasks were that were recommended, and also just make the observation that, the last two amendments, Amendment 2 and 3, we've transitioned to, sustainability plans, which might beg for a different format for the, compliance report, since, those are now the primary metrics by which we judge compliance and condition of the stock. So it's something to think about anyway for the TC and the plan review team.
Maureen?
Yeah, so these are the two tasks up on the board that the TC or the PRT would like the TC to follow up on. And again, that's just review the recreational compliance and the ability of the states to provide that data and how accurate that data are, and also to review the methods that ensure states submit the appropriate data. So it should be pretty simple, but thank you.
All set, Dave? Are there any further questions or comments to the motion that will be going back up on the board? Okay, I'll read the motion. Move to accept the 2013 FMP review and recommendations of the PRT for de minimis status for Maine, New Hampshire, and Mass for Shad, and New Hampshire and Mass for river herring. Task the TC with the PRT recommendations. Motion by Mr. Adler and seconded by Mr. Augustine. Those, I don't sense there's a need to caucus, so those board members who support the motion of the board, please indicate so. New Hampshire going to vote? New Hampshire going to vote?
I thought you were doing this by consensus.
It was unanimous. It was by consensus. Thank you, Doug. The next agenda item is a review of the Shad habitat plans for Amendment 3, and Maureen's going to walk us through that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The TC chair was unable to attend because of the snow. His flight got canceled, so I'm just going to give the report very briefly. It's just a brief summary. You all have the habitat plans in your supplemental materials, and they can be quite lengthy, so I'm trying to keep this as brief as possible. So these habitat plans are required under Amendment 3, and they're required to include current and historical spawning and nursery habitat, the threats to those habitats, and any habitat restoration programs that are in the states. So the TC held a conference call to review these plans, and there are 18 members on the call. We received plans from every state with an interest in Shad, except for the Hudson and Merrimack rivers, which aren't states but river systems, and Florida. Florida anticipates that their plan will be completed in March, and they're just having to coordinate with some other state agencies, and that's why there's a delay. And the Hudson River and Merrimack Rivers, we have an unclear date for them, but we're working on that, and we'll have them to you as soon as possible. Basically, the two trends that were in the plans are that the largest threat coastwide to shad are barriers to migration, and there's an overall lack of information on the potential impacts of climate change. So the TC made recommendations to each of the states after they received their draft plans, and those final plans were due on January 10th, and again, those are the plans that are in your materials. And the TC recommends approval of all the habitat plans and requests receipt of the missing plans as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Marin, questions for Marin. Pat?
Yeah, good report, Marin. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If we're going to make a motion on this to approve the habitat plans that they received, should we not include the names of the states specifically, or do we not want to embarrass us that have not done it?
Recommendation, Marin?
I think that would be up to the board.
Mr. Chairman, what do you want to do? Who do you want to embarrass?
Wouldn't be me.
Well, I don't know if it's going to be us, but I won't look at Jim.
Michelle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just suggest a motion to approve all the habitat plans that have been received, and we can save the embarrassment for another day.
Thank you, Dr.
And that is a motion.
So moved by Michelle, seconded by Pat. While this motion's going on the board, is there an interest from the board in addressing the missing plans, or is it the board's intent that the plans just come in as soon as possible? Pat?
Yeah, could we get an idea, Mr. Chairman, as to how long it would be before someone could do it? Maybe tedious work, and maybe be lack of staff. Maybe we could set a deadline for the May meeting or some such thing.
Marin?
Thank you. As I said, the Florida plan is expected in March, but the Hudson River plan, I've contacted New York and a couple other states that would be interested in that plan, and they haven't even started it yet, and we haven't approached anyone on the Merrimack River quite yet, so we're working on those two, but they won't be by March, probably.
Okay, Melissa, the motion was made by Michelle Duval and the seconded by Pat Augustine.
Mr. Chairman, that's Dr. Duval. Dr. Duval.
I think we got it. Are there any comments on the motion on the board? Okay. One more time or one final time? Move to approve the shad habitat plans that have been received to date. Motion by Dr. Duval and seconded by Mr. Augustine. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only comment I have is that one little housekeeping item that I think the Commission would like to see undertaken is that, presuming this motion passes, which I'm sure it probably will, that these plans, since they've been approved by the Commission, it would be good to file all these with the FERC as plans so that they can be considered during all the FERC relicensing processes that will be ongoing up and down the East Coast. And I'm sure the services would be willing to help staff file those with FERC if necessary. They can all be e-filed, I believe, so be happy to help out with that since that's part of my new duties now.
Thanks for your offer. Marin's shaking her head yes, so thank you for the suggestion. Are there any further final comments? Seeing none, those who support the motion on the board, please indicate so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Motion is unanimous, carries 19-0-0. Miranda, is there any further business under the Habitat Plan? Okay. Our next agenda item is an update on New England Council and Mid-Atlantic Council actions. Lori Steele from New England Council staff.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Lori Steele. I'm the policy analyst on the staff of the New England Council, and I've been the Atlantic Herring Fishery Management Plan Coordinator for some time now. So I'm just here to take the opportunity. I've been in touch over the past years with ASMFC staff regarding the development of management actions in the Atlantic herring fishery that relate to the conservation of river herring and shad. This has been an undertaking by both councils, actually, the New England and Mid-Atlantic councils, for the Atlantic herring fishery and the Atlantic mackerel fishery in the Mid-Atlantic. So I'm just going to give everyone an update on where we are with all of the management actions over the last couple of years related to these species. Now that we're entering a new year, the council managed to wrap up a few management actions and initiate a few new ones. So just a quick recap on where we are. Next slide. Got it? Are you? I think you're up. Yeah, you're up there. Okay. The council, as you probably are all aware, did complete Amendment 5 to the Atlantic Herring Fishery Management Plan. That was submitted to the National Marine Fisheries Service some time ago. And there was a complementary Amendment 14 to the Atlantic Mackerel Plan, which was also submitted to NIMS. Amendment 5 included a comprehensive catch monitoring program for the Atlantic herring fishery, including a lot of provisions related to observer coverage and sampling of the vessels at sea, some of which were approved and some of which were disapproved, and I'll get into that in a minute. Amendment 5 also included a suite of monitoring and avoidance measures for river herring and shad, including the establishment of river herring monitoring areas that will require 100% observer coverage, as well as formal support for a project, a cooperative research project that is coordinated by SMAS, the Sustainable Fisheries Coalition, and Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries. That project focuses on industry-based river herring bycatch avoidance. The amendment also established provisions to allow for river herring and shad catch caps to be set through a framework adjustment, which I believe is the equivalent of an addendum to an ASMFC plan. So it's sort of an abbreviated process. So all of this was set up in Amendment 5, and we are expecting the final rule and implementation of Amendment 5 any day now. At least that's what we've heard. So that's coming online soon. The Council has also developed and completed and submitted Framework 3 to the Herring Plan, which was the Amendment 5 follow-up, which included the river herring and shad catch caps. So once Amendment 5 is implemented, we're hoping that Framework 3 will follow quickly on the tails of the implementation of Amendment 5. And this framework does establish the process for river herring and shad catch caps in the herring fishery, and also includes catch caps for this year, 2014, and next year, 2015. The Council selected the final measures in November of last year. We submitted the package in January, and we're hoping to see implementation, as I mentioned, as soon as possible. So there is an expectation that sometime during this fishing year, we will see a catch cap for river herring and shad in the Atlantic herring fishery. Following the completion of Framework 3, we began Framework 4, which is going to be addressing some of the disapproved elements of Amendment 5. As I mentioned, Amendment 5 is a relatively large, comprehensive management action, and some of the measures adopted by the Council were not approved by the National Marine Fisheries Service, including dealer weighing provisions and a few of the measures to address net slippage. Without going into too much detail, we are developing now a framework to revisit those issues and potentially resubmit similar measures that will hopefully get approved this time. So we are scheduled, the Council is scheduled to take final action on that framework in April, and then implementation again as soon as possible. The other element of Amendment 5 that was not approved by the National Marine Fisheries Service was the requirement for 100% observer coverage on Category A and B herring vessels, along with an industry-funded monitoring program. The National Marine Fisheries Service is taking up these issues in an omnibus amendment to all of our FMPs. The idea is that the omnibus amendment will establish provisions to allow for industry-funded monitoring across all of the FMPs in the Northeast region, and because of the timing, the amendment will also include observer coverage provisions for the herring and mackerel fisheries, the elements of the disapproved amendments. This is on a fast track, for as fast as an amendment can be on a fast track, and we do expect that this will come back before the Council within the next few Council meetings and hopefully be completed this year with implementation as soon as possible. Just to very briefly cover some of the related actions at the Mid-Atlantic Council, as I mentioned, Amendment 14 established the provisions for river herring and shad catch caps. We are waiting for implementation of Amendment 14 as soon as possible. The Mid-Atlantic Council already set a river herring and shad catch cap in their 2014 specifications for the mackerel fishery. This cap is set at 236 metric tons. And this cap will apply on all trips landing more than 20,000 pounds or more of mackerel in all areas. The proposed rule for this action has already been published, and we are, again, expecting a final rule and implementation as soon as possible. Given the timing of the proposed rule, we are anticipating that the river herring and shad catch cap for the mackerel fishery will be effective probably March, if not April of this year. And then the Mid-Atlantic Council will be revisiting this issue and setting the catch cap for the mackerel fishery in 2015, sometime this year. The Mid-Atlantic Council is also developing Framework 9 to the mackerel plan to address net slippage, similar to the Council disapproved measures in the mackerel amendment. And they will be selecting final measures next week at the mid-meeting, so that should move forward pretty quickly this year as well. And then the Mid-Atlantic Council has also agreed to develop a river herring and shad committee and an FMAT, a fishery management action team. So this committee will be led by the Mid-Atlantic Council, but will include membership from the Mid-Atlantic Council, the New England Council, Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, and we expect that there will be an advisory panel and, as I mentioned, a technical group for this committee. The committee will focus primarily, and at least initially, on improving the technical basis for setting river herring catch caps in these fisheries, as well as monitoring and ensuring the effectiveness of the catch caps. I'm expecting this group to be convened in the next couple of months, and we'll get some more specific terms of reference or goals and objectives for that committee. So as all of this is going on, both the New England and and Mid-Atlantic councils will be participating with NIMS and the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission on the TUG, the Technical Expert Working Group for River Herring, to develop and implement a comprehensive and coast-wide conservation effort for river herring and to identify and address data gaps over the next 3 to 5 years. Okay, just very briefly in terms of what is coming up with the New England Council's river herring and shad catch caps in the Atlantic herring fishery. These will apply, as I mentioned, sometime later this year on all trips landing more than 6,600 pounds of Atlantic herring, which is essentially, on all of the directed trips for herring. The caps are specified annually and distributed by gear and statistical area clusters, and when a cap is reached, the herring fishery will close. The directed herring fishery will close in an associated closure area. This map shows how the caps will be distributed. There will be 4 caps set annually, one for the Gulf of Maine, one for Georges Bank, one for statistical area 521, which is the Cape Cod area, and then one for southern New England and mid-Atlantic. When the cap is reached, the closure areas that close the directed fishery all correspond to the catch cap areas, except for in the southern New England and mid-Atlantic. I don't know if you can see it very well on this figure, but the offshore statistical areas in the southern New England and mid-Atlantic area would remain open to the directed herring fishery. And this is really just to try to provide some opportunity for the fleet to utilize the available herring yield without having a significant interaction with river herring, and also to minimize the potential impacts on the mackerel fishery if the river herring catch cap in the southern New England area is reached early. This table provides the numbers for the caps that the New England Council is recommending for this year and next year. We are recommending in the Gulf of Maine a midwater trawl cap of 85.5 tons. In the Cape Cod area, a midwater trawl cap of 13.3. Southern New England and Mid-Atlantic would have a midwater trawl cap of 123.7, as well as a bottom trawl cap of 88.9. And then at this time, no cap is recommended for the Georges Bank area. These caps were recommended by the Council based on the median value of observed river herring and shad catch by these vessels over the last 5 years. And we don't have any information to suggest that there is a river herring and measurable river herring and shad catch in the Georges Bank area, so we're not recommending a cap at this time. These caps can be specified and modified in the future as the herring specifications are set, so we will certainly be revisiting these for 2016, 17, and 18 next year. So what's next? Because there isn't enough going on. The New England Council did talk about moving forward with further consideration of river herring and shad as stocks in the Atlantic herring fishery. That is on the list of 2014 management priorities. First priority is to address the disapproved elements of Amendment 5, and this is happening through Framework 4, as well as the industry-funded monitoring omnibus amendment. Once those two actions are developed and heading towards completion, we will be continuing to look at river herring and shad as stocks in the Atlantic herring fishery, and there will be a white paper presented to the Council sometime later this year on that issue. In the meantime, the river herring bycatch avoidance project that is coordinated by SMAST and MassDMF in cooperation with the industry has been funded, at least in part, through the 2014 and 15 herring research set-aside, and we anticipate further work through that project, and both councils will be looking at the results of that project sometime either later this year or next year, depending on timing. So that's all I have for an update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lori. Are there questions for Lori? Wilson?
Laurie, thank you for that presentation. One question is, the River Herring Shad Committee and FMAT that you mentioned, is that the same entity that some of us, I guess, have received letters from NIMS about asking if we would be willing to serve, or if our agencies would be willing for us to serve on that group? I guess it's from Kim Damon Randall, the correspondents, and Diane Beauregard. Is that the same thing?
No, that is the TUG. That is the Technical Expert Working Group that is being coordinated by ASMFC and NIMS. The River Herring and Shad Committee and FMAT that I made reference to is going to be led by the Mid-Atlantic Council, and it is going to be a committee of council members primarily that's going to be more focused on the effectiveness of the river herring and shad catch caps in the herring and mackerel fisheries. The TUG, I think, is going to really be, obviously the TUG is going to address a lot of issues, and it's going to take a more comprehensive look at issues related to catch and fishing mortality. So the River Herring and Shad Committee is going to function a little bit more like a council committee and be looking more specifically at what management actions the councils can take to ensure the effectiveness of the current caps.
Follow-up, Wilson?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Laurie. And then the second question was, when the staff white paper is completed, and will that be available on the council website?
Yes, absolutely. And I would anticipate that for sometime in the fall of this year, once we get through Framework 4 and the industry-funded omnibus.
Walter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, the catch caps and the closures, those would only be for midwater trawlers? They wouldn't affect purse seine or stop seine fisheries?
Yes, for midwater trawlers and for bottom trawl vessels in southern New England and mid-Atlantic. But no caps at this time would apply to either purse seines or stop seines.
So the closures wouldn't apply to them? Okay.
Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Laurie. And I guess what I was interested in, on the caps, except for George's Bank, there's variable caps. And did I hear you say that that was based on the mean river herring bycatch? What did you mention there for those areas, including the statistical area?
The catch caps proposed by the council are based on the median estimated catch of river herring and shad between 2008 and 2012. So we essentially took the last 5 years of data and looked at, we projected catch across the fleet for the year and based on observer data, and selected the median values for the upcoming 2 fishing years to serve as the catch caps. So it's a median of 5 years worth of catch estimates, and it's all catch, kept and discarded.
Rob?
Thank you. So just as a follow-up, I guess you're familiar that when Amendment 14 going through the Mid-Atlantic Council was progressing, and the idea was there was a really wide range of what the river herring shad catches might be in the mackerel fishery. So I was wondering how things were so much better with the Atlantic herring fishery on those type of estimates, better monitoring, or what was involved there. Because right now the Mid-Atlantic Council has one cap that is going to undergo pretty good scrutiny, we hope, from several different angles, as you mentioned, to start off with. So I'm just curious about that.
Well, I don't think that we can really say that things are that much better in terms of the ability to accurately estimate river herring and shad catch in the Atlantic herring fishery. It is true that we we're able to base the caps on more observer coverage than we've seen in the mackerel fishery. I think that the herring fishery year to year has averaged 20 to 30% observer coverage, and the mackerel fishery is significantly less. But the same problems exist with the data, one being the variability, and the second being the inability to link the cap numbers to any sort of biology or fishing mortality for the river herring and shad species. We're hopeful that the committee and the TUG both can further address those issues. But I think the same problem exists. The New England Council picked the median value in part because to be consistent with what the Mid-Atlantic Council did. I think we just have to see kind of how it's going to play out. The CVs are a little bit better because we've had higher observer coverage, but there is a lot of concern about the biological basis for the caps and the potential impacts on the herring fishery. I think there's a lot of concern among the industry about these caps constraining the herring fishery's ability to fully utilize OY. But it's a median value for the last 5 years.
David Borden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lori, how was bycatch handled for state waters? Was it deducted off the top before you set the median values? Southern New England. Inshore trawl fishery.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, essentially what we did to estimate catch and specify the catch caps is we took every trip landing more than 6,600 pounds of herring and applied or used those to project out river herring catch. There was no deduction made for state waters catch, and when we've set herring specifications, we've determined that state waters catch is insignificant in terms of setting the specification. It's part of management uncertainty. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question, and I'm not sure what kind of accountants we would have needed to make for that.
Okay, thank you.
David Pierce.
Yeah, to the point made by David Borden, through the move-along strategy, through the work done by Massachusetts, the Division of Marine Fisheries, the sampling and the plants of fish that are offloaded, we also pick up and sample catches that were caught, for example, by vessels in Rhode Island waters. And as a consequence, it's important for Rhode Island to be well aware of what is being caught in their waters, especially by bottom trawlers, because it will have an impact on what's tallied up against the catch cap itself. So there'll be some very comprehensive sampling of the different gear types through our involvement with the sampling. In addition, of course, we'll have a great deal of cooperation, as we always have had, from the fleet, from the midwater trawlers who are involved in this move-along strategy, the Sustainable Fisheries Coalition, SMAS, and the division. So that move-along strategy is going to be very important, especially because it's possible, maybe likely, that the catch caps that the Council has set could be quite restrictive and frankly, in my own personal opinion, is without a move-along strategy, it could shut the fisheries down because of catch of river herring and shad. So everyone is well aware of the likely restrictive nature of these catch caps and of the great importance for industry to continue to cooperate, and we know they will, with this move-along strategy. And I say that in part because my belief that the catch cap will be restrictive this coming year is that we do have evidence that some of the more substantial runs are improving. And with that improvement, that means there'll be more river herring, shad, river herring specifically out on the grounds where they could be caught along with river herring. So the potential is there for the catch caps to be caught, if indeed they are implemented by the National Marine Fisheries Service, and the potential is there for the fishery to be shut down. And then with one final, in the statistical areas where the catch cap is reached, and then one, let's see, there was one final point, which I can't recall. So that, all right, that's it.
Bill Adler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lori, you were running through the metric ton catch caps for the various areas, and then you said something which I lost. There was something that you said, but we're going to try to do something here to keep that fishery open, or something like that. What was that all about? It was right after you mentioned the catch cap numbers.
I think what you're referring to is in the southern New England, mid-Atlantic area. Yes, that figure. When the cap is reached in the southern New England and mid-Atlantic area, only the shaded statistical areas in the figure would close. The ones that are offshore, the white areas, would remain open. And this is because the vast majority of encounters with river herring have been seen in the inshore statistical areas. So the offshore statistical areas would remain open, in part to try to provide some opportunity for the herring fleet to continue to utilize their yield.
Thank you. That's what I heard. Thank you.
Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Rob's point, Lori, if the omnibus industry-funded monitoring amendment is approved, I presume that would address some of his concerns about the degree to which we are sampling the catches for river herring, and hopefully bring the CVs down and increase the percentage of observer coverage?
In theory, yes.
Well, and a follow-up to that is just while I have the opportunity to thank, I know we have lots of New England and Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council members that sit on this board, and I would just like to express the appreciation to them for getting both councils involved in river herring conservation in the oceanic part of their life cycle. I think that's a giant step in the direction of ecosystem-based management, which we've really got to undertake in order to restore these stocks, which were once extremely hugely important from an economic and cultural perspective, and also from an ecological perspective, because they are important forage species. So just thanks to all of you who have been a part of that effort.
Thank you. Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With apologies to colleagues in the room who are more plugged into the New England Council and Mid-Atlantic Council process, I have a question with regard to the catch caps. I listened to Laurie carefully and wrote down some numbers in terms of catch caps for the southern, or for the midwater trawl, bottom trawl fishery, etc. Was consideration given as to how these catch caps compare to the directed landings that occur in state waters for these species? Thank you.
Well, we did certainly consider that in the analysis in Framework 3. There is a comparison, a catch comparison between the state waters landings of river herring and shad and the estimates that we have for bycatch and catch in federal waters. I mean, it's hard to know what any of that means since we don't really have a biological basis or any way to link these catches back to the biology of the species, but I believe that the proposed caps, and I'm saying this without all of my numbers in front of me, but when we looked at this, I believe that the proposed caps for the herring and mackerel fisheries fleet-wide are about the same as the state landings in Maine.
Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to Dr. Pierce's point, Maine, as we took out a couple of dams on the Penobscot River, we opened access on the St. Croix. We expect those runs to grow over the next 10 years tremendously. So there needs to be a mechanism to adjust those catch caps as those runs, particularly those runs, I know are going to increase the amount of river herring in the Gulf of Maine and offshore areas a lot. It's going to take a few years, but there needs to be a mechanism to adjust those caps.
Lori?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and that's something that both councils are going to have to consider in the future. One thing that these actions do not do is they do not tie the council to setting the catch cap based on one particular methodology. We utilized the last 5 years of catch data to set the 14 and 15 caps, but we may get down the road and decide, especially as the runs, as the stocks increase, we may see different encounters in the fishery. So there may be a different method that's utilized in the future to set these caps, and we're certainly hopeful that a couple years down the road we're going to have better biology for the river herring and shad species so that we can actually link these caps to stock status and fishing mortality.
Are there any additional questions for Lori? Seeing none, thank you, Lori. The next order of business is elect a vice chair. Pat.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to nominate Bill Goldsboro.
Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to close nominations and cast one vote. Thank you for accepting that, Mr. Goldsboro. Cast one vote on behalf of Mr. Goldsboro.
Congratulations, Bill. Is there any other business to come before the board? Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Dave Simpson's comments about the compliance reports reminded me of this in terms of the fact that we all have sustainable fishery plans now, but I just wanted to let the board know that we were able to incorporate our 2013 survey data into our Shad sustainable fishery metrics, and we did trip one of our triggers, our management triggers in the Albemarle Sound, and so we submitted an addendum to our sustainable fishery plan to the technical committee, and we are implementing a seasonal reduction that is designed to achieve a 50% overall reduction in harvest in the Albemarle Sound area. So the sustainable fishery plans are working.
Sounds good. Any further business? Seeing none, thank you all very much. This meeting is adjourned.